Hi, I'm Graeme, Chief Exec of SCMA. A lot continues to happen. We had new guidance published in Scotland earlier this week to support the future reopening of nurseries during Phase 3 of recovery. This led to a number of questions from you in terms of the impact that this might have on childminding, particularly in relation to blended care, what would happen when the schools go back in the summer, but also around ELC and funded hours. So I'm going to try to answer as many of those questions as we can on the basis of current understanding. So the first thing to say is that earlier this afternoon, the Scottish Government confirmed that we are now entering Phase 2 of recovery as we move out of lockdown. So this will include an extended household group, such as for single adults living alone, or for lone parents with children being able to form a group with another household and meeting indoors. We'll see more people being able to meet outdoors gradually. We will see dentists and play parks reopening. We will see non-essential shops reopening. And we'll also see factories and warehouses where staff can't work from home being allowed to reopen as well. As before, this won't all happen at the same time or overnight. It'll be a gradual reopening process over 3 weeks. And very much linked to that, we expect to see a gradual continuing increase in demand for childcare. So since all childminding settings were allowed to reopen from the 3rd of June, and clearly that is going beyond those of you who remained open during lockdown to provide critical childcare for key workers and vulnerable children, we've seen a gradual increase and a continuing increase in the number of settings open. Currently, we believe there are in excess of a third of childminding settings in Scotland open, and we believe that number will continue to increase as demand for childcare rises. So earlier this week, as I'd mentioned, the Scottish Government published guidance to support the reopening of nurseries and other larger childcare settings during Phase 3 of recovery. We still don't have a date for Phase 3 and when that will be, but as soon as we receive that, we will share that with you. Now, for absolute clarity, while the guidance is labelled as for early learning and childcare settings, this is not for childminding, and the terminology reflects the wider sector rather than just the delivery of funded hours. Childminding, as you'll be aware, has its own guidance. This will be updated during Phase 3, when our current restrictions on capacity are expected to be both reviewed and lifted. Separate guidance will also be developed to support out-of-school care in Scotland. The nursery guidance was published early and in advance of their being able to reopen, as it was recognised that nurseries and other larger settings may have to bring staff back from furlough. But also, there was a desire to give local authorities as much time as possible to consider the implications of the guidance on their ability to offer funded hours this year. So while the new guidance is for nurseries and other larger non-childminding settings, it is very much expected that it could have secondary implications for childminding, your practice, and the families that you support. So the first thing to be aware of about the nursery guidance is that when reopening, this will also be based upon a small group model and on minimising movement between these small groups so as to reduce the risk of transmitting infection. Groups of children within nursery settings must be no larger than 8 children, with 2 metres between these different groups of children at all times, and no mixing or interaction between groups where possible. Also, where possible, the same staff should try to support the same groups of children and not mix. Now, it's very much expected, as you will guess or anticipate, that this could have a major effect on capacity within nurseries and other larger settings. So potentially this has got 2 major implications for childminding. Firstly, in terms of blended care. Both the existing childminding guidance, which we're operating within just now, and the new nursery guidance to support their reopening in Phase 3, state that blended placement should only take place when absolutely necessary to support critical childcare, such as for key worker families. In such cases, this would be a matter for the individual setting's discretion. It would follow a risk assessment and consultation with the families and other setting concerned. This position is based on the latest public health advice at this time and may be reviewed as advice continues to develop. Now, within SCMA, we know that as many as half of childminders in Scotland may be involved in the delivery of blended care, whether that's as part of funded hours or if it's wraparound care. before school, after school, or indeed before and after school. So potentially, if blended care is largely not allowed at this time, we are really aware that this could have a major implication on your business model and the families that you support. So this is a point which we have made and we will continue to make to the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government recognises this, but also we all must accept that we're only able to do what the public health advice tells us is safe to do at this time. So a number of members have also got in touch to ask about the restrictions on blended care, the ones which exist just now for childminding and also planned for when nurseries can reopen in phase 3. Do these relate just to blended care involving care provided by more than one setting on the same day, or do they also relate to childcare delivered by more than one setting at different times of the week? So for example, if a family uses a nursery setting one day and a childminding setting another day. The published guidance is not explicitly clear on this, so we have raised this with the Scottish Government and the Care Inspectorate, and we can confirm that at this time, the restrictions on blended care are of a blanket nature. So they cover both childcare provided by more than one provider in the same day and also by more than one provider over the course of a week. However, I'd like to strongly stress that the public health advice which we have, which is underpinning the guidance that enabled childminding to reopen and which will enable nurseries to reopen from phase 3, is very much based upon public health advice and understanding at this point in time. This advice could change as we make progress in suppressing the virus and as more public health advice is developed on the safe wider mixing of households. Following contact with SCMA, the Scottish Government has also confirmed that they will seek further public health advice on blended placements, including, importantly, those at different times of the week, in advance of our updating our childmind guidance in phase 3. Clearly, we recognise there are also potentially major implications once schools return in August, and many of you have been in touch asking about what will happen. Will blended care be allowed? Will I be able to provide wraparound care? Will I be able to drop off or pick up children? And also particularly if, as is currently planned, blended learning is implemented and children may only be at school maybe 1 or 2 days a week, what happens on the days when children are not at school? If parents or carers have to go back to work, will children be allowed to attend a childminding setting on those days when they're not at school? Who will pay? Will childminders be allowed to pick up or drop off children? And again, that's a recurring question we're receiving from you. I'm afraid that we're back once again to a position that we've been on a number of times throughout COVID-19, where nobody has answers to those questions at this time. Not the Scottish Government, not the Care Inspectorate, not local authorities, and not SCMA. What we can say, as I've mentioned earlier, is that specific guidance is still to be developed on out-of-school care, which we hope will answer many of your questions. And also the public health advice will continue to evolve. What we can say also beyond that is that we are very much aware of these issues, the questions you're asking us, and we are working actively to resolve them as quickly as possible. We very much expect that if blended learning in schools proceeds as is currently planned and described, there could be very significant demand from parents and carers for childcare on full or part days when children who would normally have been at school will be at home and will require childcare when their parents need to work. So as such, we will continue to engage with the Scottish Government and others to identify a solution which meets both the public health requirements, but is also workable for parents, for carers, for families, for employers, and for childminders and other childcare providers. Now, if I move on to the second potential impact of the nursery's guidance on childminding. If we recognise that there will be significantly reduced capacity within nurseries and other larger settings when they reopen, the guidance requires local authorities to prioritise the continued provision of critical childcare for key workers and vulnerable children. But it also requires local authorities to prioritise the provision of 600 hours of funded ELC. Now, this is a really important point which we want you to be aware of, as it will inform the ELC offer made to both parents and providers. So due to our having been in a national emergency and just emerging from lockdown, we're aware that some of you may have felt that ELC and the Scottish Government's commitment to deliver 1,140 funded hours of free childcare for all 3 and 4-year-olds and some 2-year-olds in Scotland had dropped off the radar. It hasn't. That's not the case. The Scottish Government recognised quite early on during COVID-19 that it would not be possible for local authorities to deliver 1140 in full by August. Recruitment of staff had to be paused and building projects were also delayed. So what the Scottish Government and COSLA decided to do was to agree to remove the legal requirement on local authorities to deliver 1140 by August 2020. In the background, as you'll be aware, local authorities have been coordinating critical childcare throughout lockdown, but they've also continued with their planning for ELC. And where possible, it was hoped that what would be available to parents would be as close to the full entitlement of 1140 as could be. However, recognising where we are with COVID-19 and the significantly reduced capacity that is expected to arise within nurseries and other larger settings when they reopen, the Scottish Government is only now requiring local authorities to prioritise the delivery of 600 funded hours of ELC. Some local authorities are still hoping they can deliver 1140, either in the short or longer term, but some have already come out before the guidance was published. And many more, we're aware, have been waiting for the publication of the new guidance on Monday because they wanted to see what the capacity restrictions would be. They needed to understand what the implications of this might be on their plans and ultimately what they could offer to parents. Realistically, it might take some time for this information and details of the offer to become available. Now, clearly, we're aware that some parents were already receiving 1140, where local authorities had been well ahead with their plans. Other parents might have been expecting to receive 1140 from August and have been planning on that basis. Now, if parents don't receive the hours that they had been under the impression they would receive, potentially this could lead to a disconnect and some frustration. And as childminders, you may feel you get caught in the middle of this. But also, it could affect the number of hours which you'd been expecting to deliver if you have been involved in ELC. We're aware that local authorities around Scotland are at different stages of engaging parents around this. Some have engaged parents early on and have sought to work collaboratively with SCMA to bring on more childminders to help with capacity. In some other areas, we're aware that local authorities have had to go back out to parents and at the stage of asking parents or carers to go beyond their first 3 choices and are perhaps looking at their 4th or in some cases even their 5th choice for childcare. Now, I'd like to offer my personal observation at this point that while a number of local authorities get childminding, are supportive, understand it and work positively with childminders to include them in their plans, not all local authorities are being as inclusive or indeed offering childminding as an option to parents. Sadly, this has been the case throughout ELC expansion, and this needs to change. We're all in this together, and childminding may be well placed to help local authorities with these capacity challenges. Now, I appreciate what I've said may be quite challenging and also provides a lot of information to take in and digest this afternoon. If the public health advice continues to indicate that blended care cannot be provided due to the need to minimise movement and contact between groups, then this could result in parents or carers having to decide which single setting their child goes to, be it a nursery or a childminder. Being mindful of this, I have already personally raised this matter with the Minister for Children and Young People during our last video call with members, during which I affirmed that it is our expectation that where children receiving funded hours through a blended model, parents should also be offered the opportunity of taking all of their funded hours with a childminder rather than it just being assumed by a local authority that this should be with a nursery. Potentially where we are just now could also change how we view out-of-school care, particularly if blended learning in schools proceeds after the summer. This could mean that instead of thinking of out-of-school care as wraparound care, that parental demand for out-of-school care is quite different. Going forward, they could be looking for whole days or part days during a traditional school day when children are not at school, parents are working and childcare is required. I've probably spoken enough this afternoon, so I'll wind up here. What I would like to say in closing is that, as we've done throughout COVID-19, I've tried to provide as much clarity as we or anyone has at this time. We recognise the position could change, it probably will, and will inform you as soon and when as it does. I've also tried to be really open and honest with you. I think that's important. And while the weeks and months ahead will hold challenges for us all, we do believe strongly that there will be opportunities for childminders to offer capacity where you have it within your settings to assist with the high level of demand for childcare, which we believe there will be going forward. I think one of the main learning points for us all during COVID-19 has been the additional benefits which childminding has to offer parents due to your smaller setting sizes, and which enabled a number of our settings to remain open during lockdown. And I'll leave you with that positive thought for today. Stay well.